القصة هي قصة النهايات السياسية.
Good afternoon. You're watching the English newscast on Future Television. I'm Salam, and these are today's top stories. The dead body of 26-year-old Mohammed Hamiyeh is found hidden inside a store owned by his father in Beirut's Tariq Jdid. EU ambassadors meet with Prime Minister Salam and underscore the EU's expectation that a new president will be elected soon in Lebanon. The Saudi King Salman is set to meet with US President Barack Obama at the White House to discuss partnership between both countries. The dead body of a 26-year-old man was found hidden inside a store owned by his father in Beirut's Tariq Jdid neighborhood. The victim, identified as Mohammed Hamiyeh, had gone missing last night. His father, Hayad, reported his disappearance to the police, who began to search for him this morning. Police dogs found the man murdered and placed in a black bag under cardboard boxes in the store's warehouse. Two Syrian nationals who work for Hamiyeh at the shop did not come to work this morning, raising doubts about their possible involvement in the crime. Free Patriotic Movement leader Michel Aoun has urged a heavy turnout in a massive demonstration that his group called for to demand a roadmap to end the country's political crisis. Speaking at a news conference in his Rabia residence, Aoun said, "We will gather to eradicate the evil which has ruled us for decades." The FPM leader said his party demands a fair election law based on proportional representation and the election of a president without misinterpretation. The FPM protest is planned to take place at Beirut's Martyrs Square this afternoon. The protest comes as the country is witnessing a number of anti-government demonstrations fueled by the cabinet's inability to solve an ongoing trash crisis and rampant corruption. Earlier today, Interior Minister Nuhad al-Mashnout chaired a security meeting at the Interior Ministry to discuss means to protect protesters. He asked officers to order internal security forces personnel to work on protecting protesters, preserve public and private property, prevent rioting, and ensure normal traffic flow. EU ambassadors have underscored the EU's expectation that a new president would be elected for Lebanon and that Parliament would approve important draft laws. During a meeting with Prime Minister Salam at the Grand Sarai, ambassadors expressed strong support for Salam in his efforts to keep the government stable and functioning in light of the continuing political stalemate and the presidential vacuum. On the latest protests that swept through the streets of Beirut over the government's paralysis, the ambassadors underscored the EU's support for the right of the Lebanese citizens to assemble and to petition their government for the effective application of the rule of law and transparency in public policy. They also underscored that citizens have a right to enjoy basic services, to have an accountable government and functioning state institutions.
The ambassadors of the European Union member states, as well as the European Union delegation, just had a meeting with the Prime Minister Salam at the Grand Sarai. We've come here to express our very strong and ongoing support to him in those very heady and difficult days, especially in the situation where there is a political stalemate and a continuing presidential vacuum. We reiterated our expectation that the president would be elected without further delay, and that the parliament will speedily advance on a new electoral law and with a view to legislative elections. We also highlighted a need to address pressing issues that are at the root of current unrest. We, as the donors and as EU delegation, as bilateral donors, are willing to help the government to resolve those issues. But at the same time, we call on the government, especially in light of all the protests, to address those issues, such as waste management, provision of electricity, and all the things that were expressed in the protests that we've seen in the streets. With that, I'd like to thank you and wish you a good day.
Lebanon's permanent representative to the UN, Nawaf Salam, said there is a consensus among the world's major policymakers to support Lebanon's stability. In remarks published in a Safir newspaper, Salam said there is also consensus to regulate the work of constitutional institutions through the election of a president. The meeting of the International Support Group for Lebanon is scheduled to be held on September 30th on the sidelines of the General Assembly. Meanwhile, U.S. Ambassador to Lebanon David Hale has called for the speedy election of a new president as he highlighted the importance of protecting the right to peaceful, nonviolent protests. Hale spoke following a meeting with Prime Minister Salam at the Grand Sarai.
Prime Minister Salam and I met today to discuss the upcoming meeting of the International Support Group for Lebanon at the UN General Assembly later this month in September, and yesterday's discussion of Lebanon in the Security Council. And I think it's safe to say that the international community's support for Lebanon's sovereignty, security and stability is as strong as it has ever been. We also discussed the challenges facing the government, especially in light of continued civil society demonstrations. We spoke about the importance of one of our shared core values, the right of free speech and free assembly. And peaceful, nonviolent protest is an integral part of our two nations' histories and enshrined in both of our constitutions. The Prime Minister and I agree it's a right that must be protected and respected, as it is essential for true stability in any society. And citizens everywhere look to the state to protect their right to free speech and assembly, and citizens everywhere have a responsibility to exercise their rights peacefully and responsibly. Accountability is expected when either side transgresses rights or responsibilities. The challenges facing Lebanon are serious. There are security, political, economic, and humanitarian problems, so many of them spilling over from the conflict in Syria. And during these difficult times, Lebanon's people, leaders, and institutions should come together, not pull apart. Only by acting together in the national interest can these challenges be overcome for the sake of the Lebanese people. America welcomes any efforts to reactivate a functioning government and cabinet, but there is a deeper issue. As the members of the UN Security Council reiterated yesterday, now is the time for Parliament to meet and elect a President of the Republic as soon as possible. America will continue to support the Army and security services as institutions with one and only one objective in mind: the strengthening of the Army's means to be the sole legitimate protector of Lebanon's people and borders, including from extremist threats. And we will continue to support the principle of civil society's right to voice its views and frustrations without taking sides. Although these problems can only be resolved by the Lebanese themselves, America stands ready to support Lebanese institutions and the Lebanese people each step of the way.
Kurds mourn drowned refugee Aoun Kurdi and his brother in Syria's Kobani. More details coming up next. Welcome back. Saudi King Salman is set to meet with U.S. President Barack Obama at the White House. The two leaders will be seeking a renewal of a historic American-Saudi strategic partnership that has frayed recently amid a rising set of challenges in the Middle East. The conflict in Yemen, civil war in Syria, nuclear deal with Iran, and recent collapse in global oil prices will all be points of discussions for the two leaders. The new Saudi king's first visit to Washington since ascending to the throne comes at an auspicious time for Obama, as the president nears a political victory in the U.S. Congress over opponents of an Iran nuclear deal. Saudi Arabia has deep concerns about the recent U.S.-led diplomatic opening with Tehran that grants Iran more than $120 billion in multilateral sanctions relief in exchange for giving up its nuclear weapons ambitions. The Syrian Kurdish boy whose death has become a symbol for the desperate plight of refugees trying to escape the war and find safety in Europe has been laid to rest along with his brother and mother. 3-year-old Aoun Kurdi, who had drowned along with his mother Rihan and his 5-year-old brother Galip while trying to reach the island of Kos in Greece, were buried in their hometown of Kobani. Reports say the funeral was attended by hundreds of supporters and Kurdish officials from the city. UN High Commissioner for Refugees Antonio Guterres warned that the EU faced a defining moment after little Aoun's death and called for the mandatory resettlement of 200,000 refugees by EU states. Britain said it would take thousands more from refugee camps on the Syrian border as the heartbreaking images of Kurdi's lifeless body on a Turkish beach ramped up pressure on political leaders to act.
Britain has a moral responsibility to help refugees, as we have done throughout our history. We're already providing sanctuary and we will continue to do so. As the second largest bilateral donor to the crisis, we have provided over £900 million in aid to help those affected in Syria and the region. We've funded shelter, food, water, vital medical supplies for millions of desperate refugees fleeing the conflict and helping them to survive in the countries around Syria, like Jordan and Lebanon. No European country has done more than Britain in this regard. Were it not for that massive aid, the numbers making the perilous journey to Europe today would be even higher. Now, we've already accepted around 5,000 Syrians, and we've introduced a specific resettlement scheme alongside those we already have to help those Syrian refugees particularly at risk. As I said earlier this week, we would accept thousands more under these existing schemes, and we keep them under review. And given the scale of the crisis and the suffering of people, today I can announce that we will do more, providing resettlement for thousands more Syrian refugees. We will continue with our approach of taking them from the refugee camps. This provides them with a more direct and safe route to the United Kingdom, rather than risking the hazardous journey which has tragically cost so many their lives. We will discuss how best to design these schemes and the numbers we will take with NGOs and with our partners, and we will set out more details next week. Alongside this, Britain will continue to work with partners to tackle the conflict in Syria, to provide support to the region, to go after the smuggling gangs exploiting these people, and will continue to save lives at sea.
And still on the migrant crisis, European foreign ministers and officials have gathered in Luxembourg to discuss the massive influx of migrants and refugees in countries across Europe. German Chancellor Angela Merkel and French President François Hollande have urged EU members to accept binding refugee quotas. Meanwhile, in Hungary, hundreds of migrants, including Syrian refugees, were stranded on a train for a second day, demanding passage to Germany in a standoff with riot police. They spent the night on packed carriages at a railway station west of Budapest, having left the capital on Thursday morning, believing they were heading for Austria and Germany.
Migration and refugee crisis for sure will be the heart of our work in these 2 days, as it was the case also with the defense ministers yesterday when we discussed the transition to phase 2 of our operation in the Mediterranean against the traffickers and the smugglers. With the foreign ministers, I expect we will focus mainly on our work with third countries, countries of origin and transit.
And the Schengen regulations put it as a very clear responsibility of the member states at the external border of the Schengen zone to defend the borders. And the Schengen Code says it very clearly that it is only allowed to cross the Schengen border on official border crossing points in opening hours, and it is the responsibility of a member state to ensure that. That's why we are committed to comply with all the Schengen regulations to defend our border. That's why we have built a fence. There are official border crossing points where everyone can come in. We establish transit zones where migrants can submit their request for asylum, and we come to a final decision within a couple of days, and until then the migrants have to stay in these transit zones.
And across the Atlantic, Guatemala's Congress has sworn in a former judge as president, while his predecessor has appeared in court over corruption allegations just hours after resigning. Alejandro Maldonado, a 79-year-old conservative who only became vice president in May, will serve out the rest of Otto Perez Molina's term, handing over on January 14th. Separately on Thursday, a judge citing a flight risk ordered Perez to be held in prison while hearings over his alleged role in a customs corruption scandal continues. This marks the end of our bulletin for today. Now for a recap of our top stories. The dead body of 26-year-old Mohamed Hamie is found hidden inside a store owned by his father in Beirut's Tari Jdidi. EU ambassadors meet with Prime Minister Salam and underscore the EU's expectation that a new president will be elected in Lebanon. In Saudi, King Salman is set to meet with US President Barack Obama at the White House to discuss partnership between both countries. Those are your top stories for today. I'm Linda Tamim, and I wish you all a very nice weekend.
القصة هي قصة تاريخية السياسيين.